I'm going first? Let's see, what story shall I tell? Before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Fukuzawa Reiko. I'm a fresh new student who just started here this spring. I hope you older students will look after me well. Emi-chan, was it? We're in the same grade and yet we've never met. Well, the school is pretty big. Or maybe you're always skipping class. Ahahahaha. On that note, I've seen you skipping class in the nurse's room before. I'm kidding. Sorry. You wanted a scary story, right? Well then, how about this one? There's always at least one strange kid in every class, right? Not like the kid who gets bullied or the kid who seems to fade into the background or anything like that. Like someone who's different to everyone else. Something about them is strange. Their thoughts and actions are different to everyone else. Like they're not quite right in the head, or they're not of this world. It's a little difficult to put into words. But there's a kid like that in my class. I'm in class G. Her name is Motoki Sanae. Sanae-chan really is strange. For example, during cooking class, you use a knife, right? Well, when she holds the knife, she just stares at you, grinning all the while. Then, "It sure would hurt if this pierced your eye, huh?" she'll mutter. It's scary. Then she'll turn the knife around and point it at herself. And she'll stand there, just like that for a while. Then she'll let out a big sigh. That was scary, she'll say. And all we can do is stand there, frozen. We just quietly watch her, unable to move, wondering what will happen next. Then she'll cut her finger with the knife and howl like a baby. It's not a huge amount of blood, but still, she cries like the world is ending. We're the ones who are surprised. Then, before she eats lunch, she always prays for more than 10 minutes. I don't know what she says, but she mutters something in a small voice the whole time. Then she bows to her lunchbox over and over. Then, finally, she'll start eating. Unbelievable, right? And when she eats, each bite takes over 30 chews. So it takes her forever to finish. She uses her entire lunch break just to eat. Then, when she's done, she starts bowing and praying and muttering again. Creepy, right? Scary, right? But it's not like she's stupid. She gets pretty good marks at school. Her tests are always somewhere near the top of the grades. And it's not like she's bullied either. It might not mean much coming from a girl like me, but she's pretty cute. The type of face anyone could love. Those types of girls are lucky. There was once a time where I was even jealous of her. But whatever. She'll quickly forgive me. You see, we're actually quite good friends. Maybe I'm strange as well. Still, Sanae-chan sure is strange. But she's interesting as well. The other day, she suddenly looked up at the classroom ceiling and started twirling around. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I got dizzy spinning around," So now I'm spinning the other way. That'll fix it, she said. There's no way that would fix it. I was amazed. But if Sanae-chan says it, you laugh. Isn't there someone in your class like that too? But that's not all that's strange about her. She has an amazing secret. I happened to see that secret by chance. The other day, Sanae-chan wasn't feeling well, and she sat out PE class. At first, she watched the rest of us, but then she said she wanted to lie down, so she went to the nurse's office. Her face was pale. She really was sick. We were playing volleyball at the time. I jabbed my finger with the ball. It really hurts when that happens, doesn't it? So I went to the nurse's office. The school nurse wasn't there though, and Sanae-chan was lying alone in one of the beds. The blanket was pulled up to her face, and she trembled beneath it. I debated whether I should call out to her. She was trembling so hard that the bed itself was almost shaking, like it was about to break free and go nuts. It didn't seem like the best time to call out to her. But she was my friend. I approached the bed to speak to her. The closer I got to her, the more she trembled. The bed rocked back and forth. That's how bad she was trembling. I was so worried that I reached out for the blanket. "Sanae-chan, are you okay?" There was no response. I thought that maybe she didn't hear me, so I called out again in a louder voice. "Hey, Sanae-chan, are you okay?" But there was still no answer. I didn't know what to do, so I grabbed her shoulders and shook her. "Sanae-chan! Sanae-chan!" I screamed. Then a messy head popped out from beneath the blanket. Their face was terribly swollen, their lips purple and tongue hanging out. It was so horrible that I didn't want to look at it again. "Shut up! I'm sick here, you know? Can you just leave me be?" It was a different person. I thought for sure it was Sanae-chan lying there, so I was surprised. I was so embarrassed it felt like my face was on fire. Then the school nurse soon returned. "What's wrong?" I jabbed my finger." While the nurse took care of it, I was unable to calm down. From the next bed I could hear, "Jesus, come on, I've got a fever here." The sulking voice went on. If his fever was that bad, why didn't he just go home? I don't usually go to the nurse's office that much, but Nurse Iwazaki is a kind and gentle nurse. I can understand why the boys often fake being sick just so they can see her. "Okay, you're good to go now." After she was done taking care of my finger, I worked up the courage to ask her something. Did Motoki-san come here earlier?" "Motoki-san?" She looked at me strangely. Of course, she wasn't our head teacher, so there was no way she'd know who I meant just by her last name. Did a girl come here earlier complaining about feeling unwell? From class 1G. The nurse looked troubled. "I don't know. I stepped out before on some other business. She might have come then." "Nobody came." The boy with the swollen face on the bed gave a curt reply. I wasn't even asking him. He must have been a fan of Nurse Iwasaki's. That's why he wouldn't go home and was lying in the nurse's office instead. When they talk about overstepping one's bounds, they mean guys like him. But I found it strange. If Sanae-chan didn't go to the nurse's office, then where on earth did she go? What if she had passed out somewhere? What then? I mean, this was a girl who burst into tears at the simple sight of blood. I went looking for her, but I couldn't find her so easily. She was sitting in her own seat in our classroom. Did she return because the nurse wasn't in the room when she went? Or did she not even go there to begin with and return straight to the classroom? I don't know why, but Sanae-chan was sitting at her desk. Both arms hung by her side as she lay draped over her chair, her head hanging back limply. She looked like she was passed out, not sleeping. No, she looked like she was dead. Like her eyes were rolled back in her head. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. I just looked at her, dumbfounded. Then her whole body suddenly jumped, just like a marionette. The very next moment, her back straightened. Then her head slowly started to spin around and around, like drawing an arc. I tried to call out, but it was like something was in the back of my throat, pushing my voice back down. And my body wouldn't move, like I was paralyzed. I couldn't even turn my eyes away from her. I was shocked. As Sanae-chan stood there, frozen like a wax doll, something like white smoke came out of her mouth. Her mouth hung half open, and the smoky thing grew bigger and bigger. It seemed a little too solid to be smoke and oddly well put together. It was like cotton. Then it slowly took on human form. They call it ectoplasm. Even I know that much. Ectoplasm is a spirit, right? It came out of Sanae-chan's mouth, so I thought it was her spirit. It didn't really resemble her too much, but it was a beautiful woman. A beautiful woman with long hair. It was like a clump of smoke, but it still had clear facial features. I thought perhaps it could see with those eyes. It felt things with those eyes in its head. Not with its eyeballs, but with its mind. So even though it was smoke, it could clearly see. I don't know the finer details, but that's what I thought. But the ectoplasm was real. So the ectoplasm was looking through its eyeballs, but the face I could see in the smoke was seeing with its mind. Is that too difficult to understand? But anyway, the ectoplasm was looking at me. Or maybe it would be better to say, I felt like it was looking at me. But then suddenly my feelings returned. It got easier to breathe, and I could talk again. I debated whether it would be a good idea to call out to Sanae-chan or not. I mean, if something happened to her when I called out to her, it could have been awful. But then I couldn't just leave her like that either. What should I do? leave her. At any rate, I decided to stay quiet and watch what happened first. I mean, you know, ectoplasm was coming out of her mouth. If I called out suddenly and surprised her, then what? She didn't seem to be in any trouble, but if that changed, I could jump in then. So, I stayed quiet and watched her. The ectoplasm shrank and expanded for a while, floating around the room. A thin thread of smoke seemed to connect it to Sanae's mouth like a lifeline. That thin, unreliable thread, like a baby's umbilical cord, was supporting it. If something happened to cut it, then what would have happened? I grew worried. All this took place over just a few seconds, but to me, it felt like hours. A few moments later, Sanae-chan started violently trembling. Then, the ectoplasm got sucked back up into her mouth. Not all at once. Slowly, like it was confirming its place of return first. It left no trace behind as it went back into her mouth. It did this all at the same time. Then, Sanae-chan trembled and fell forward. Her face collided with a desk. It looked painful. And then, she stood up, groaning like she'd just been forced awake in the morning. It was like she really had been asleep, and she rubbed the swollen area between her eyebrows. Then she suddenly turned and looked at me with sleepy eyes. I didn't know what to do. I quickly decided. Approach her. Things felt awkward, so I considered running. But our eyes met. I couldn't exactly run after that. Plus, she was my friend. Sanae-chan! I grabbed her hand without thinking. It was shockingly cold, like grabbing a corpse. I unwittingly let go. Then she strongly gripped my hand. I felt like I was about to cry. Reiko-chan, like this. Hold my hand, she said with unfocused, vacant eyes. She was looking at me, but it was like she was actually looking right through me at something beyond. It was like I was hypnotized, and I nodded and did as she said. Her hands gradually got warmer. Her eyes started to focus again as well. Then she suddenly hung her head. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. Things felt awkward. Reiko-chan, did you see me? I was surprised. Surprised that she'd suddenly say something like that. I didn't know how to answer. Tell her that you saw. I felt like if I lied, she'd see through it anyway. I answered her honestly. What was that? And you know that it happens? She looked up at me before casting her gaze back to the floor. Yeah, it's my grandmother. Your grandmother? You mean that wasn't you? Not me, my grandmother. She died 3 years ago. Ever since then, she's been inside me. Every now and then she comes out like that. Sanae-chan answered while looking at the floor. I didn't know how to respond. My grandpa's there too. And my father's older sister, my mother's father. All sorts of people are inside me, she said as well. I just stood there silently and nodded. It didn't feel like the right time to joke around. With a serious expression, I answered, "Oh, I see. And my grandma and the others, they teach me all sorts of things. Like on tests and even the weather the next day. All sorts of things. I wonder what everyone thinks of me." My heart pounded. If people thought strange things about her, they would tell her. "Don't be afraid, Reiko-chan. You're a good friend. I hope you'll continue being my friend after this as well." I answered her quickly. "Yeah," I said. Then I told her that PE class hadn't finished yet, so I said goodbye. Sanae-chan stayed behind in the classroom to rest. See? She's strange, right? We're still good friends, even now. She still carries on like that, but she's a good person. Oh yeah, you gotta keep this a secret. Ever since then, she lets me know what's going to be on the tests. She asks her grandmother, she said. And they're always right. But it seems unbelievable, doesn't it? Do you believe? I don't. Right? You wouldn't, unless you actually saw it. But I said that Sanae-chan always prays when she eats, right? I got closer to her to hear what she was saying one time. What do you think she was saying? "Oh my, today's lunch looks delicious as well." And, "Awesome, I'm so happy." She was saying stuff like that. But it wasn't her voice. It was a different person's voice. I thought maybe she was imitating someone, but it wasn't that. Listening closer, I could hear all sorts of voices at the same time. Not just one voice, but several voices, all talking at once. I looked closer at her face. I could see human faces in her open mouth. Tiny human faces, roughly the size of the tip of a matchstick. There must have been around 20 of them. They were all staring at the food. And they were all talking, saying whatever they wanted. I froze on the spot again. Then Sanae-chan suddenly grabbed my hand. She smiled at me. "My grandma told me something just now. She said you'd meet a girl soon. That girl is dangerous. So she told me to tell you to be careful." Be careful, Reiko-chan. That girl's name is apparently Emi-chan. That's the end of my story. Emi-chan, the fact that we met like this can't have been a coincidence, don't you think? You might not believe it, but Sanae-chan was giving you some advice. You're hiding something, aren't you? No? Well, I don't know about any of that. But you should be careful. I don't know the details either. Well, time for the next person's story, I guess. I'm looking forward to it. Uhuhu.